Every army has its deserters, and the Grand Army of the Republic was no exception. Despite being programmed for absolute loyalty to the Republic, a number of the Republic's clone troopers abandoned the GAR to escape the horrors of war. Most of the deserters we usually hear about are regular clones though, like Cutler Quain, low-ranking troopers that never had all that much individual impact anyway. But there were some more high-profile deserters as well, including 2 Alpha-class ARC troopers. Considering that there were only 100 Alpha ARCs, the desertion of these 2 would have been pretty impactful, which makes their stories all the more fascinating.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The creation of ARC troopers was a complicated process. They were commissioned at the suggestion of Jango Fett, who believed that a unit of more independent and creative clones would be needed for special operations. The Kaminoans agreed, but they were always very skittish about the ARCs, fearing their individuality and unpredictability. Their fears were seemingly confirmed by the first batch of ARC troopers, the Null class, who were all defective and extremely volatile. The Kaminoans almost scrapped the ARC trooper program altogether over the Nulls, but Jango was able to convince them to attempt a second batch. This batch of 100 ARC troopers was the Alpha class, and its numbers were much less volatile than the Nulls, enough that the Kaminoans were comfortable letting them exist. The Alpha class ARC troopers were much different from ordinary clones. They were more independent and they retained much more of Jango's personality, with most of the class being antisocial cynics of some variety. The Kaminoans were still skittish about them, as they were about any creation of theirs that they didn't have complete control over, but they could at least rest assured that none of the Alpha ARCs were defective. Well, except for one. Every batch of clones had a few members that were considered defective by the Kaminoans, and in the Alpha class, the aberrant clone was Alpha 02. Unlike the other ARC troopers who were successfully indoctrinated with loyalty to the Republic and its Grand Army, Alpha 02, nicknamed Spar by the clone trainers, rejected his programming entirely, remaining fully independent and lacking any loyalty to the Republic, or anyone else for that matter. The Kaminoans discovered this early on and put Spar through reconditioning. The reconditioning didn't work, but Spar was smart enough to know that the Kaminoans would kill him if they figured that out, so he pretended otherwise, and he was able to dupe the Kaminoans. Spar, together with the other Alpha ARCs, was trained rigorously by Jango Fett himself, becoming one of the most skilled soldiers in the galaxy. For many years, he was able to blend in with his fellow ARCs, and after his reconditioning, he didn't have any noticeable issues with his trainers. Indeed, he became close friends with one of the Mandalorians Fett recruited to train the clone commandos, Mij Gillamar, who also worked as a doctor treating injured commandos. This friendship ended up saving Spar's life. When he was biologically 17, Spar overheard a story about something Jango Fett had done, and he was immediately hit with an intense flashback. Not one of his own memories, but one of Jango's. He soon discovered that he had all of Jango's memories prior to his cloning. Knowing that the Kaminoans would probably terminate him if they found out, he faked a psychotic break to meet with Mij Gillamar and let him know what had happened. Gillamar called in a favor from Jango, who ultimately agreed to smuggle Spar off Kamino aboard the Slave One. With Fett's help, Spar escaped Kamino and became the first clone deserter. Let's put a pin in Spar's story for now. We'll get back to him soon. After Spar fled Kamino, the remaining 99 Alpha class ARC troopers were put into stasis by the Kaminoans, who planned to keep them as a last resort weapon in case Topoka City was on the verge of being captured by the enemy. When the ARC troopers awoke, the Clone Wars had been raging for 2 months and had finally come to Kamino, and Topoka City was being overrun. The ARCs turned the tide of the battle and were soon deployed all over the galaxy, sent to the fiercest theaters of the Clone Wars. Some served as liaisons to Jedi generals on the front lines, while others were deployed on covert missions. Alpha 30, nicknamed Sull, fell into the latter category. In 21 BBY, he was sent to Gaftakar to train the planet's marginalized Marit population as an insurgent militia capable of overthrowing the planet's human-dominated separatist government. During the mission, he disappeared, and by the time the clone commandos were sent to finish the operation, he was presumed dead. But the clone commandos of Omega Squad and the Null-class ARC Arden soon discovered that Sull was indeed alive, and that he had deserted the Grand Army of the Republic. When Arden tracked him down and asked him why, Sull's answer proved shocking. To quote their conversation, "So, tell me when you first lost your enthusiasm for a long-term military career in the glorious Grand Army of the Republic." Let me see. I think it was when they blew my buddy's brains out. Yep, I do believe it was. Sull's friend, a fellow ARC named Tavo, had deserted before him, and he had been tracked down by Covert Ops clone troopers. He had learned the hard way that the Grand Army of the Republic had a strict policy that no clone was allowed to leave the army alive. Deserters were not arrested, as was publicly claimed, but covertly murdered. Upon learning this, Arden helped Sull escape Gaftakar and reported to his commanders that the rogue clone had been killed in action. Sull ended up falling in with Spar, his fellow ARC deserter, before Spar set off to rejoin the war effort, but on the other side. During the first few years after his desertion, Spar had worked as a bounty hunter, using what he remembered of Jango's life to become one of the best in the business. But midway through the Clone Wars, he found another calling. In the wake of Jango Fett's death on Geonosis, he had begun to believe that his purpose in life, the reason he had been given Jango's memories, was to rebuild the Mandalorian Super Commandos. To that end, he traveled to Mandalore to recruit aspirant warriors to join his cause. One of his earliest followers, Fen Shaisa, spread rumors that Spar was the son of Jango Fett, the last Mandalore of the true Mandalorians, and Spar took advantage of this rumor to claim the title of Mandalore for himself, renaming himself Mandalore the Resurrector. He and 200 initial recruits formed the Mandalorian Protectors. Initially, the Mandalorian Protectors were a small faction, one of many squabbling over Mandalorian space, but after the death of Duchess Satine and the splintering of Maul's Shadow Collective in 20 BBY, the Mandalorian Protectors became the most powerful of these factions. They seized control of most of Mandalorian space, leaving only Sundari and the former core territory of the new Mandalorians to be squabbled over by Bo-Katan's Death Watch loyalists and the remnants of the Shadow Collective. Spar greatly expanded his forces using battle droids, and once he had a suitably large army, he joined the Clone Wars, declaring support for the CIS. For months, Spar and the Mandalorian Protectors tore the Republic a new one on battlefront after battlefront. They struck fast and hard, dishing out heavy casualties to the GAR every time. But they eventually became so effective that Darth Sidious started to see them as a threat. During the early stages of the Outer Rim sieges, Sidious lured the Mandalorian Protectors into a trap at Norval 2, where they were completely annihilated by Republic forces. Only Spar and 2 others survived. Spar was severely traumatized by the destruction of the Mandalorian Protectors. He gave up the title of Mandalore and went into self-imposed exile, despite Fen Shaisa repeatedly urging him to try rebuild. Without Spar's leadership, the Protectors fell through, and Mandalorian space fell into chaos once more. After the Clone Wars, Spar briefly joined Clan Scarada at their redoubt on Mandalore before setting off on his own once more, hiding out in the Extracarium Nebula. There, he began to succumb to clone madness brought on by his mind's inability to reconcile Spar's 2 sets of memories. By the time he was discovered by Aelin Vel, Boba Fett's daughter, Spar had completely lost his grip on reality. Vel initially thought Spar was her father, so she shot him on sight, an ignominious end for one of Mandalorian history's most important figures. So that's our look at the ARC Trooper deserters. But what do you think? Do you remember our super old original video on Spar? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.